I never thought a grown man could say something that would make me feel 16 again. Small, guilty, like I'd done something wrong just by existing. But that's exactly how it felt when my boss leaned back in his leather chair, crossed his arms, and said, "Isn't 4,000 a month enough for you?" Not yelled, not mocked, just stated, like he was talking about the weather. And I swear, for a full second, my brain did that thing where it freezes, reboots, and tries to figure out if it heard correctly. Here's the part that makes this whole mess feel like a confession. 4,000 a month was barely enough to breathe in our city. Rent alone chewed half of it. Groceries, gas, and the privilege of existing in a place with functioning public transportation devoured the rest. But I'd never once complained, not once. This wasn't a story about me wanting more. It was a story about him wanting everything. For context, I worked in a small maintenance supply company, the kind that sells industrial cleaners, gloves, mops, and things nobody thinks about until they run out. I was the financial guy, which is a fancy way of saying I handled invoices, tracked orders, balanced accounts, and made sure the company's credit card didn't get declined in front of suppliers. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't miserable. It was just stable. Or at least it used to be. My boss, Leonard, had this way of talking that made even normal requests feel like accusations. He'd hover behind me during month-end reports, clicking his pen like a metronome of judgment. He'd ask me the same questions 3 different ways, as if hoping one version would catch me lying. And when I answered calmly, always calmly, he'd smirk like that was suspicious too. Still, the job was manageable. I kept my head down, learned his moods, and treated every sarcastic remark like background noise. I didn't give him a reason to doubt me, but somewhere around my 2nd year, things started shifting. Little things at first. An invoice for $312 that had no corresponding shipment, a vendor name I didn't recognize, a receipt for equipment replacement that was suspiciously vague. When I asked Leonard about the missing details, he'd wave a hand and say, "Handled. Just file it." That was fine, once, maybe twice, but it kept happening. Then there were the reimbursements, $480 for client entertainment. But the date matched a day Leonard didn't have any meetings scheduled. A $190 gas charge when his company car was supposedly in the shop. A hotel stay 2 cities away, marked as supplier visit, even though we hadn't onboarded anyone new in months. I didn't assume the worst. People make mistakes. Systems glitch. Vendors mislabel things. But there's a certain kind of silence that only exists when someone knows they're doing something wrong. And every time I'd bring up a discrepancy, that silence hung between us, heavy, intentional, warning me not to poke further. One afternoon, while reconciling statements, I found a payment for $2,000 marked as warehouse equipment upgrades. The note was in Leonard's handwriting. The problem? Our warehouse hadn't been touched in 3 years, unless you counted the spider webs that had upgraded themselves naturally. I checked the vendor address, then the phone number, then the registered business name. It took me about 3 minutes to realize the truth. The vendor didn't exist. The address was a P.O. box. The phone number was a burner line. And the business name? It matched a personal LLC Leonard used for consulting. That was the moment everything in my stomach dropped like a stone. Still, I didn't act. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Absolutely sure. Because accusing your boss of stealing from the company is the kind of thing that either saves your life or destroys it. And I wasn't going to gamble on guesses. So I did the only thing that felt safe. I watched, and I waited. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became painfully clear. Every missing dollar had the same fingerprints. Every questionable charge traced back to one source. Every discrepancy bent in the same direction, toward him. Yet Leonard walked around the office like he owned air itself. He'd tap my monitor with a knuckle when numbers didn't load fast enough. He'd sigh dramatically if I asked for clarification on an order. And once, I'll never forget this, when He laughed when I brought lunch from home, saying, "Careful, Grant. People might think I'm not feeding you enough here." I smiled, because that's what you do when someone who signs your paycheck tries to punch you in the dignity. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even particularly emotional. It was a Tuesday, a slow one. I'd stayed late to close out quarterlies, and Leonard wandered into my office like a bored cat. He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me like he was appraising something he already planned to throw away. That's when he said it. "Isn't 4,000 a month enough for you?" Just like that. No context, no explanation. I asked him what he meant. He shrugged, like the meaning should have been obvious. "You're lucky, you know. Most people your age don't make half that. You should work with gratitude instead of constantly nitpicking my reports." My reports, his handwriting, his theft, my blame. I remember sitting there, fingers resting on the keyboard, heartbeat suddenly slow and calm, because in that moment, that exact moment, something inside me aligned. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. If he thought $4,000 a month bought my silence, he was about to learn what it really bought. I didn't answer him right away. He stood there, blocking the doorway, waiting for me to either agree I was overpaid or apologize for noticing numbers that didn't add up. That was Leonard's favorite trick. Turn reality into a personality flaw. "I'm not nitpicking," I said finally. "I'm doing my job. There are charges on the account that don't match inventory, vendors, or any projects we have open." He snorted. "You're overthinking it. That's your problem, Grant. You live in spreadsheets so long you forget there's a whole business around them." There was a time when a speech like that would have worked on me. I'd second-guess myself. Go back through everything. Assume I'd missed something obvious. But by then I'd checked the books 3 times. It wasn't noise. It was a pattern. "Then explain this one," I said, turning my monitor so he could see. I'd pulled up the $2,000 warehouse upgrade payment. "We never received anything. The vendor address is a P.O. box, and the phone number doesn't connect to a supplier." He stared at the screen, and for half a second his eyes flicked. Just a tiny involuntary movement, like he'd walked into a room and forgotten why. Then the mask slid back on. "Do you think you know more about this company than I do?" he asked quietly. "That's not what I said." "You're making me repeat myself," he continued, ignoring me. "I approve the expenditures. You record them. If you can't handle that, maybe 4,000 a month is too generous for the skill set you're bringing." There it was again, the number as a leash. I let the silence sit. That made him more uncomfortable than arguing ever did. "I'll document my concerns," I said finally. "If there's an explanation, it'll be in writing. That protects both of us." His jaw tightened. "You don't need to document anything. You need to do your job." "I am," I replied. "That's the problem for you." That was the last thing I said before he walked out, muttering something about entitled employees. Under his breath. I didn't slam anything. I didn't rage. I just opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Q3 Reconciliation Backup. Inside it, I started saving copies of every suspicious transaction, every email where he dismissed questions, every statement that didn't line up. Then I plugged in a small external drive from my desk drawer and backed that folder up. Because if Leonard was right about one thing, it was this. The business was bigger than my spreadsheets, and I had a feeling the only way anyone would believe me was if I brought the whole picture. The next few weeks were a slow boil. Every time I brought something up, he'd twist it into an attitude issue. "Why are you obsessed with this? Do you think I'm stealing from my own company? Do you understand how insulting that is?" He never said the word fired, but it hung in the room like smoke. Then he started taking shots in front of other people. We were in the break room one morning when one of the sales guys, Mark, joked about his expense report being late. Leonard laughed and said, "Don't worry, Grant loves going through everyone's receipts. He treats it like a crime show." Everyone chuckled. I smiled a little, because what else do you do? But my face must have betrayed something, because Leonard added, "Relax, I'm paying you more than enough to care this much. Again with the number, again with the implication that my paycheck came with a gag order. The irritation built slowly, like grit in a shoe. I could have lived with the condescension. I'd lived with worse. What I couldn't live with was the realization that he was wiring money out of the company and leaving my name on the bottom of every report that said, reviewed by Grant Harrison. If it went bad, I wasn't a witness. I was a signature. I started coming in 30 minutes earlier and staying an hour later, not because I was a hero, because I needed time alone with the system. I exported full transaction histories. I pulled merchant codes from the credit card processor. I dug into bank transfers older than my employment, just to see how far this went. The deeper I went, the worse it got. There were payments to his LLC, marked as consulting fees, even though we didn't have any consulting agreements. There were client dinners on days we had no meetings scheduled. There was even a staff bonus disbursement that never hit anyone's paychecks except his. On paper, it looked like we were spending aggressively to grow. In reality, he was quietly hollowing the place out. One night, around 9 p.m., I was alone in the office with nothing but the hum of the old HVAC unit and the glow of the monitor. I had 3 years of data lined up, and the pattern was so clear it made my chest hurt. That was the moment something shifted for me. Up until then, I'd still been trying to fix it by talking to him, by assuming he'd stop if confronted enough. I sat back, stared at the mess, and realized I wasn't just dealing with a difficult boss. I was dealing with a man who was perfectly fine letting me take the fall if this ever blew up. That night, I stopped being the loyal employee trying to save his company. I started being a man trying to save his own life. The micro steps came next. I opened a personal email account separate from anything Leonard knew. I sent myself encrypted archives of the reports, statements, and flagged transactions. I printed a few key documents and put them in a plain folder at home, tucked behind the boring stuff no one ever steals: tax returns and appliance warranties. I also did something that felt small but wasn't. I booked an appointment with a financial crimes attorney for a consultation. I didn't even know exactly what I'd ask yet. I just knew I needed someone who'd see numbers the way I did, as evidence. While all of this was happening, Leonard's attitude kept sliding from passive-aggressive to openly hostile. He started calling me into his office for performance check-ins that were thinly disguised interrogations. "You've seemed distracted. You're not as positive in meetings as you used to be. I need team players, Grant. People who appreciate what they're given. Appreciate what they're given." I was watching him siphon tens of thousands out of the company, and he was talking about my gratitude. The injustice of it sat under my skin, hot and sour. Still, I played my part. I nodded, said I understood, promised to focus on solutions. The more he underestimated me, the more space I had to work. The first tiny win came from somewhere unexpected. Our external accountant, Lydia, came in to review the quarterly. She was sharp, no nonsense, and not the type Leonard could charm. I watched her face as she flipped through the reports I'd prepped. Her eyes lingered a beat too long on one particular page. "Can you print the backup for these consulting fees?" she asked. Leonard answered before I could. "They're all in order. I can send them later. We had to outsource some project planning." She didn't argue. She just made a small note on her pad. Later, when Leonard left for a late lunch, she stopped by my desk. "You look tired," she said quietly. "Quarterlies," I replied. She lowered her voice. "If something doesn't make sense on paper, it usually doesn't make sense in real life either." Our eyes met for a second. She didn't say more. She didn't have to. I walked away from that interaction with one clear message. If this turned into a fire, I wasn't the only person who'd smelled smoke. But that was just the beginning. Leonard must have sensed he was losing narrative control, because his next move was to get ahead of it by going on the offensive. He called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, the kind of timing bosses choose when they want you stewing all weekend. His blinds were half closed, light cutting in thin, dusty lines. "I've been looking at your hours," he began, "and your productivity." I almost laughed. My productivity was the reason he was still walking free. "You're spending too much time digging into old transactions," he continued. "That's not what I pay you for. You create extra work, you slow us down, and frankly, you make me wonder if you're the right fit here." There it was. The threat? "If you think I'm not the right fit," I said calmly, "you should document that, in writing." He stared at me, thrown off by how steady my voice was. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. "It means if there's a performance problem, we both deserve a clear record," I replied. "So there's no confusion later." His eyes narrowed. "You really think that $4,000 makes you untouchable, huh?" I shook my head. "I think it makes me responsible, and I take that seriously." He leaned forward. "Let me be perfectly clear. If you keep raising concerns about things you don't understand, we're going to have a different conversation, one that doesn't end with you walking back to your desk." I held his gaze. "Then maybe we should both make sure we understand everything." He waved me off like swatting a fly. "We're done." We weren't. Not even close. I walked out of that office with my heart pounding, but not from fear, from decision. If he was willing to threaten my job to protect his theft, he was telling me exactly how dangerous he was. On my way home that night, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Lydia, the external accountant. "Grant, I'd like to schedule a separate call next week to clarify a few entries. Strictly procedural." Strictly procedural. Sure. I stared at that line in my car, parked outside my apartment, hands still on the steering wheel. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment things started sliding out of Leonard's control and into mine. The call with Lydia was scheduled for Tuesday at 9:30 a.m., a time too early for Leonard to hover, and too late for him to pretend he just didn't see the invite. She opened with routine questions, vendor codes, invoice formatting, a few outdated categories, nothing that would alarm anyone listening. Then her tone shifted. "There are 3 consulting fees from the same LLC," she said. "All approved by Leonard. Do you know what these were for?" I kept my voice neutral. "No documentation was provided." "And you asked for it?" "Multiple times." She paused. "And the response?" "Dismissed." There was a soft exhale on the other end of the line. Not surprise, confirmation. "Grant," she said quietly, "I need you to send me the detailed records you have, the unfiltered ones." I hesitated. "Is this official?" "No," she said, "not yet, but it will be. And when it is, you're going to want to be on the right side of the paper trail." That was the moment the ground shifted under Leonard, even if he didn't feel it yet, because once an external accountant smells fraud, it's not a matter of if, it's when. Still, I didn't rush. My job wasn't to burn the building down. My job was to make sure I wasn't inside when it collapsed. So I sent Lydia exactly what she asked for. Every flagged transaction, every questionable charge, every vague approval, and then I waited. 2 days later, chaos began. Not loud chaos. Not screaming or cops or alarms. The quieter kind, the kind that happens when people in positions of power start asking the wrong man the right questions. At 10 a.m., the owners of the company, who lived in another state and only visited quarterly, suddenly logged into the shared accounting drive. At 10:07, they opened the expense reports for the last 2 years. At 10:09, they opened the reconciliation backups I'd created. They stayed logged in for 2 hours. Leonard didn't notice. He was too busy telling the sales team they needed to push harder this quarter, as if motivation were a faucet he could turn on. Around noon, he walked into my office with a forced smile. "We're meeting in 10, he announced. "Owners on Zoom, routine check-in." Routine? Sure. He sat at the conference table like a man about to host a cooking show. The owners joined with cameras on, faces stiff, voices clipped. We went through inventory, vendor performance, supply costs. Then one of them, Patricia, The older woman, with the dry voice and no patience for theatrics, said, "Leonard, can you explain the consulting fees we found from LR Strategic Solutions?" My heart didn't race. My face didn't flush. I just watched the exact moment Leonard's world tilted. He blinked. "Which ones?" "The ones you approved." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Leonard glanced at me, probably hoping for backup, some shared lie we'd rehearsed. I looked back with the expression of a man whose conscience had finally gone on vacation. "They're legitimate," he said. "We brought in outside help for planning." "Planning what?" Patricia asked. There it was, the first crack. He stammered something about restructuring initiatives and efficiency targets. The owners interrupted him 3 times. Then they asked for documentation. Leonard tried to pivot, tried to charm, tried to downplay. None of it worked. The meeting ended abruptly with, "We'll follow up later today. Grant, please stay available." Leonard left the room so fast the chair spun. I followed slowly, deliberately. Every step felt like stones settling into place. He cornered me near the hallway. "What the hell did you give them?" he hissed. "My reports," I said. "The same ones you approved." "You're trying to sabotage me?" "No," I replied. "I'm making sure the numbers add up." His face turned the color of bad deli ham. "You think you're clever? You think they'll believe you over me? You're a mid-level employee making $4,000 a month." There it was again. $4,000. His entire worldview. "I didn't accuse you of anything," I said. "They asked for information. I provided it." He jabbed a finger at my chest. "If this blows up, you're going down with me." I didn't flinch. "Only if I've done something wrong." That was the moment he realized he'd lost control of me. His eyes changed. Fear, then anger, then calculation. He stormed into his office and slammed the door. I went back to work. At 3:14 p.m., everything accelerated. The corporate attorney emailed me requesting copies of the flagged transactions. The owners emailed a list of follow-up questions. All for Leonard. Lydia emailed me privately. "Stay calm. The wheels are moving." Leonard noticed the shift in energy like an animal sensing an earthquake. He kept pacing past my door, pretending to check the thermostat or printer. At 4:02, he finally snapped. He barged into my office and threw a stack of invoices onto my desk. "Fix these," he barked. I scanned them. They were ancient invoices, all legitimate ones, but he'd highlighted random lines in red marker. Nothing made sense. "These don't need fixing," I said. "They do if I say they do." I closed the folder. "Leonard, what are you really doing right now?" He stared at me like he wanted to tear my skin off. "You've been digging where you shouldn't, spreading paranoia, undermining me." I didn't look away. "I documented discrepancies. That's my job." "No," he said. "Your job is what I tell you it is." I stood, slowly, calmly. "No," I said. "My job is protecting the company's financial integrity." Something inside him broke, not emotionally, but strategically. He realized then that I wasn't scared, and fear had always been his leverage. "You know what?" he spat. "Maybe we should reconsider your position. Maybe 4,000 a month is too much after all. Maybe." And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. His computer chimed, then chimed again, then again. Emails, notifications, calendar alerts. He walked stiffly to his desk and opened his inbox. I couldn't see the screen, but I saw his posture collapse. The owners had sent him an emergency meeting request. Immediate. The corporate attorney was CC'd. So was HR. So was Lydia. He looked up at me, eyes wide and full of a fear he could no longer hide. "What did you do?" he whispered. I picked up my notebook and pen. "I told the truth." He sank into his chair like the air had been punched out of his lungs. "They think I stole," he muttered, staring at his screen. I didn't respond. He buried his face in his hands. "This is a misunderstanding. They're overreacting. You should join your meeting," I said softly. He looked up, eyes red. "They're going to destroy me." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. but inside, something quiet and long suffocated finally exhaled. He stood slowly and walked to the conference room like a man being led to the gallows, and they thought I was gone. I wasn't, not even close. They kept Leonard in that conference room for almost an hour. I didn't hear raised voices, just muffled, steady talking, the kind people use when they're making decisions they don't plan to walk back. At some point, HR pinged me. "Grant, please be available to join when called." I kept working. Numbers are good for that. They don't care if your boss is being dissected in the next room. They just want to add up. 50 minutes in, my phone buzzed again. "Conference room now, please." Leonard was already seated when I walked in, shoulders tight, eyes bloodshot. The owners were on the big screen, Lydia in a smaller window, corporate counsel in another. HR sat at the far end of the table, legal pad open. "Grant," Patricia said, "we have a few questions about the records you prepared." I pulled out my notebook, just like any other meeting. She walked me through entries one by one. I explained what I'd seen when I'd asked for backup, what answers I'd received. I kept it boring. Boring is safe. Boring is trustworthy, Leonard interrupted 3 times. He's overstepping his role. He's misinterpreting the data. He doesn't understand how these arrangements work. Each time they let him talk. Each time they went right back to me. Finally, counsel cleared his throat. "Leonard, there appear to be payments from the company account to an LLC you control, with no supporting contracts or deliverables. Is that accurate?" Leonard tried to smile. "It's all above board. I've floated personal funds to the company in the past. These are repayments. We just didn't formalize it." "And why?" counsel asked. "Didn't you disclose that to the ownership group or to our office?" Silence. Leonard's hand closed into a fist on the table. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said. "We're talking about supporting my own business. The amounts are small compared to—" "They total over $80,000, Patricia cut in. "That's not small." Her tone didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Leonard's eyes flicked to me again, desperate now. "He's the one who signed off on the reports," he snapped. "Every month, reviewed by Grant. He's as responsible as I am. Maybe more." There it was, the throw. I met his gaze, then looked straight into the camera. "I signed off on the reports using the information I had," I said. "Every time something didn't make sense, I flagged it. Verbally first, then by email. When those concerns were dismissed, I documented that dismissal. I don't approve what I can't see." Lydia nodded slightly in her little video box. "That matches my experience," she said. The questions were there. The answers were not. HR scribbled something down. Counsel spoke again, voice neutral. "Leonard, given the volume and structure of these payments, we'll need to conduct a formal audit and suspend your access to all financial systems effective immediately." Leonard stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. "You can't be serious," he whispered. Patricia folded her hands. "We are." He turned to me like he still had one card left. "Grant, tell them," he said. "You know I put you in a good position here. I've paid you well. I've given you—" Somewhere in the middle of his sentence, I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. "You've given me $4,000 a month," I said quietly. "You've also put my name under reports that hid your withdrawals. I'm not taking the fall for money I never saw." For a second, no one spoke. That was my small explosion. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. HR closed the folder in front of her. "Leonard," she said, standing, "let's step into your office to arrange your transition." "Transition," he repeated, as if he'd never heard the word before. He left without looking back. The door closed. The air shifted. On the screen, Patricia exhaled. "Grant," she said, "we appreciate your diligence. Lydia has recommended that we retain you as our primary internal point of contact during the audit, if you're willing." "If it's structured properly," I replied, "and in writing." Something like a smile crossed her face. "We'll put it in writing." That was the end of the meeting. Not cinematic, just administrative. But the interesting thing about paperwork is how fast it can become reality. By the end of the day, Leonard's email was disabled. His keycard stopped working. A third-party forensic team had access to every transaction for the last 5 years. He came back only once, late in the afternoon, escorted by HR to box up his office. I kept my head down, but I felt him stop in my doorway. "You think you've won," he said. I turned in my chair. "I think you stole from the people who trusted you," I replied, and I think they finally noticed. "You won't last here," he shot back. "They'll turn on you next." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll see them coming." He stared at me, jaw working like he wanted to spit something out and couldn't find the words. Then he shook his head, laughed once, a short, bitter sound, and walked away. They took his name off the website the next morning. The audit took months. Those things always do. They work layer by layer, code by code, until even the lies are tired. During that time, my world got strangely simple. I answered questions. I pulled records. I clarified timelines. I met with counsel twice, the owners once. No one raised their voice. No one asked me to be grateful. They just wanted the truth. The truth, when it finally landed, was ugly and unsurprising. Leonard had been siphoning money for at least 4 years. Not enough at once to trigger automatic alarms. Just a steady drip. Consulting fees, bogus reimbursements, phantom vendor payments. By the time they tallied it, the total was closer to $120,000. The owner's attorneys handled the rest. There were negotiations, demands, words like misappropriation and criminal exposure floating through emails. I didn't see Leonard again. I did hear through Lydia that there'd been a settlement and that the company reserved the right to pursue criminal charges if he violated the terms. But that wasn't the part that stayed with me. What stayed with me was a short meeting 2 weeks after the audit wrapped. Me, Patricia, and the other owner on the screen. "Grant," she began, "we want to formally thank you for how you handled this. You were put in a bad position, and you acted with integrity. We'd like to increase your salary and give you a new title to reflect your responsibilities." The raise was generous. The new title sounded good on paper. I sat with it for a second. "I appreciate that," I said. "I really do. But I think it's time for me to move on." They looked genuinely surprised. "May we ask why?" the other owner said. "Because for 2 years," I answered, "I came in here worried that if everything fell apart, I'd be the only one who knew how it happened, and no one listened until it benefited them. I don't want to work anywhere I have to prove I'm telling the truth about numbers that are right in front of everyone." They didn't argue. They didn't threaten. Patricia just nodded slowly. "Fair enough," she said. "We'll support you in the transition. You'll have a strong reference from us." And they meant it. I stayed another month to help the new controller get up to speed. I documented processes, explained supplier quirks, handed over my carefully labeled chaos. Then, on a quiet Friday, I packed my own box. 1 monitor stand, a coffee mug, a plant that had somehow survived 3 winters, and walked out. My next job didn't come from luck. It came from Lydia. She introduced me to a mid-sized firm across town that needed someone who could clean up messy books without panicking. The pay was more than $4,000. The culture was different in all the ways that mattered. In my first week, the new boss, a woman named Claire, called me into her office. "If you see anything in the accounts that doesn't make sense," she said, "I expect you to tell me. Loudly. Even if it's my mistake. Especially if it's mine." I believed her, not because she said it, but because she put it in the company policy she handed me. These days, my life is boring in the best possible way. I get up, make coffee the way I like it, sit at a desk where my signature means accuracy, not cover. My rent is paid. My fridge isn't empty. No one hovers behind me clicking a pen like a loaded weapon. Sometimes, when a junior staffer hesitates before pointing out an inconsistency, I recognize the look. "Say it," I tell them. If something doesn't add up, it matters. I don't name Leonard. I don't need to. Every now and then, someone from the old place texts me a rumor. He's consulting for some tiny outfit now. He tried to start his own company, but nobody trusts him. Remember when he used to brag about how much he took care of us? I read the messages, put my phone down, and go back to work. People like to think revenge is loud, slamming doors, shouting matches, dramatic exits. Mine wasn't. Mine was a series of quiet decisions, documented questions, and one boundary I refused to back away from. The last time Leonard's voice crossed my mind clearly was on a drive home from the new job, paycheck in my pocket, windows cracked, city rolling by. "Isn't 4,000 a month enough for you?" It echoed differently then, because it had never really been a question. It was a statement about what he thought I was worth and what he thought he could buy with that amount. My silence, my signature, my willingness to carry his theft on my back. He was wrong. 4,000 a month wasn't enough for that. 5 wouldn't have been. 10 wouldn't have been. The only enough in this whole story was the moment I decided I'd had it. Enough of being talked down to. Enough of watching him siphon what wasn't his. Enough of pretending gratitude and fear were the same thing. I couldn't make him honest. I couldn't make the company see sooner. I couldn't get those stolen dollars back. But I could refuse to be the man who stayed quiet while someone else wrote my name under their crime. So that's what I did. And now, when I look at my payslip at the end of the month, there's no question attached to it. I earn what I make, I keep what's mine, and no one ever again gets to ask me if my integrity has a price.